I've been a truck driver for a few months, and I've seen some weird things. When I first took this job as an over the road trucker, I thought it would be exciting. I imagined traveling the country, seeing the sights, and coming home with stories to tell my friends and family. I was right, this job is exciting. But I soon found that I'm better off not sharing these stories with anyone close to me. Not because I don't trust them, but because I'm worried they wouldn't believe me. Let me back up. My name is Brittany. I'm 22 years old, and I've been driving with a rather large company for a few months now that I won't name due to obvious reasons. Ever since my training ended, and I got my own truck to start solo, I've seen some pretty weird shit. When you're driving the loneliest road in America, in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, things can start to get to you. I suppose it was only a matter of time before I saw something out in the desert at nearly midnight. I still had another hour to the nearest truck stop, and blasting the freezing cold air against my face was all I could do to keep myself from dozing off at the wheel. Irresponsible, I know, but until you work this job, you don't understand how much laxity comes with it. I was driving this highway in the desert in the pitch blackness of a cold summer night when suddenly something ran out into the road in front of me. Before I could even react, it was gone across the other side into the bushes. I barely got a good look at it, but I could have sworn it looked like a large white dog, faster than any dog I've ever seen. I tried to just ignore it and keep driving. I see animals crossing the road at night all the time. It didn't seem like anything to get worked up about. Not even a minute later, I felt my truck lurch to the left and into the other lane. I quickly tried to swerve and correct it, and carefully stepped on the brakes so I wouldn't wreck. It can be easy to jackknife an 80,000-pound metal death machine. I slowed down and regained control. I looked for the nearest pullover spot so I could see what the hell had hit my rig and check for any damage. Once I found a spot and turned off, hit my brakes and hopped out, I walked around to the other side and saw a large dent in the side of my trailer. What the fuck? I said to myself as I walked over to inspect the side of the trailer. It was a huge dent, at least 5 feet wide and tall. No real shape to it, just a general dent. I couldn't imagine what could have hit me. My first thought was maybe a boulder rolled down from the side of the hill and smashed into me, but I didn't think I was driving next to any hills or mountains. As far as I knew, it was flat desert. I heard the sound of dirt crunching underfoot behind me, and I turned around. My breath caught in my throat, and my stomach dropped as I saw something standing not 50 feet away from me. It was large, menacing, and white. I can't even find the words to describe what this thing looked like. It looked like a very large dog, and that's a stretch. It stood on 2 short, stout legs, with long forearms reaching down past its knees. Its shoulders were broad and heaving, as if it had just run a marathon. Its head was mostly shaped like a wolf, with a large snout filled with razor-sharp teeth bared in a snarl, saliva dripping from its maw. Its jet-black eyes bored right through me, filled with hatred and hunger. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place. This creature stood between me and my only salvation, my truck. We stared at one another for a moment until I broke the silence. "You are one ugly motherfucker," I said. It snarled at me, then very unexpectedly turned and walked away slowly using all 4 of its limbs, receding into the bushes and into the night. I stood there for what felt like several minutes, wondering if it would jump out and feed on my flesh at any moment. It never came back. I ran around the front of my truck and jumped inside, locking the door quickly and flooring it, as fast as you can floor an 18-wheeler, which is not at all. Soon I was back on the highway, barreling down it, as if my life depended on it. For a while, it felt like it did. Within a half hour, I found myself at the truck stop and shut down for the night. Sleep was difficult that night. I was certain every noise I heard was that damn creature returning. Luckily, the night went on without another incident. I have more stories to tell, but this is getting long, so I think I'll stop here. Remember, guys, be careful out there on the road. You never know what else is out there with you. This happened to me when I worked for DoorDash last year. and I am still shaken up from it. For context, I'm 25, and I had just come out of a serious car accident where I almost died. This is the other time I almost died. I was driving around my town, where I have lived for most of my life. It's a fairly large town, and its people are generally pleasant and nice. It was getting late, and I was about to call it a night when I got a notification from someone who wanted pizza. I was going to ignore it when I saw that the pay was an incredible $400. Even though it seemed too good to be true, I thought, fuck it, why not? After I picked up the pizza, I looked at the address and realized how far away it was. The drive there was uneventful and calm. I looked at the address again and truly began to realize how sketchy this whole thing was. The address was on this deserted old path with 0 houses on it. I had a bad gut feeling about this whole thing, and it was beginning to seem a bit too good to be true. After a minute of more driving, I finally found the house at the end of the road. It seemed really old and unkempt, but I decided to set aside my worries and muster up the courage to walk up to the front door. I rang the bell to the almost abandoned-looking, dilapidated building, kind of like the one out of Monster House. After some time waiting around the front door, a huge, obese man opened it and said in a gruff voice, "Thanks, man. The money's just in the basement." I nervously smiled back, reached my arm out, gave the man his pizza, and said, "Do you mind getting the money? You know your house better than me?" I laughed awkwardly, but the man seemed unfazed by my request. After just standing there, he said, "Okay, just follow me down so I can show you." I now had a pit the size of Mars in my stomach, but I decided to suppress it and convince myself it was fine. I walked down the musty stairs and into the even worse-smelling basement with the man. The man looked at me and motioned towards a small door in the corner. "Your money's in there," he said in a more serious tone. I swallowed the lump in my throat and pushed the door open. There in the room was a dentist-type chair with wrist and ankle restraints on it. On a small table next to the chair was a variety of saws and knives. My blood ran cold, and my instincts screamed at me to get the fuck out. I sprinted past the man, who tried to grab me, on my way out, but wasn't fast enough. Thank fuck the door was unlocked, so that I could get out of the house. I practically launched myself into my car and booked it out of there. When I got home, I called the police and reported him, but I haven't heard back from them. A year later, this still holds up as the most horrific and disturbing thing that has ever happened in my life. My girlfriend talks in her sleep. My girlfriend talks in her sleep. At first, it was cute and hilarious to tell her what she said. It was harmless nonsense. The sky is folding. Chutney. Or, we need to raise the ground. We'd talk the next day about if she remembered her dream, but she never did. I wish I knew what she meant by we need to raise the ground. Some context. Our nightly routine is for us to start out cuddling and then give up once it gets too hot. And then we're usually both on our sides, back to back. She would fall asleep before I do, and so I would hear the full range of her nightly musings. Honestly, at first, I was eager to hear what she said. It was always funny to tell her and our friends what she would say, while deep in the throes of REM. But now I'm done. I prefer she not talk anymore. How am I going to sleep after what happened last night? Last night, around 11 p.m., she was asleep, and I was still up reading. Back to back, I hear her mumble something under her breath. I couldn't quite make out what she said, but I lean over from my book to peek at her face. And she is sleeping soundly. I return to my book, get absorbed back into its pages. At some point, I fall asleep. Next thing I know, I'm woken up by my girlfriend talking at full volume. I open my eyes, and at some point in the night, both of us have turned to lay face to face. My girlfriend's eyes are wide open. She is staring right at me, mere inches from my face. But her eyes are vacuous, like she is looking through me. These eyes, man, it's like she was straining to widen them as much as possible. Those are the eyes I fell in love with, and right now, they are scaring the absolute piss out of me. My heart rate skyrockets and chock full of adrenaline. I throw off the covers and jump out of bed. Looking at her, her eyes follow me like a painting, but her body stays still. For 1 second, I decided that my book light was keeping her awake, and what she had said was, "Can you please turn that off?" Now, out of bed and looking at her, she's not right. Her body hasn't moved, but her eyes dart from looking at me to looking around the room. I dare to ask her, Uh, are you all right? No response. Those eyes look at me when I speak, though. They are now deadlocked, looking right into my eyes. Her breathing hasn't changed. That is a sleep breathing for sure. That's when, while looking right at me, she says in a too deep voice, "Come back to bed, dearie." My girlfriend has never called me dearie before. We have pet names, sure, but they range from pumpkin, baby, to cupcake. Dearie sounds like something my grandmother would call me. I decide I'll get more information before I climb back into bed with a potentially possessed girlfriend. "Are you awake, sweetie?" No response. The eyes dart from me to the wall, to the door, and then the ceiling. I'm about to nope out of the room when her wide open eyes roll to the back of her head. The white from those eyes stands out in the dim radiance of the booklight. "No pupils in sight," she insists. "Of course I'm awake, come back to bed." With a subtle tap of the fingers on the comforter, looking at her fingers now, I'm starting to come around. She's never sleepwalked before. Surely she is awake now, if she is moving her hands. But looking at her fingers, it is as though she is pretending to have control. They're all going in different directions, one finger pointing straight down and the others to the side. Those hands are not my girlfriend's hands. They are simulating normal movement as best they can, though. I say, "I'm going to get a drink of water. Baby, be right back. Can I get you anything?" Fully planning to run out of the house the moment I'm over the threshold. But my normally agreeable and sweet girlfriend decides I'm not allowed to leave. "As serious as cancer," she says in that too deep horror voice. "Take one step out of that door, and I will rip out your throat and shit down your neck." Shocked but understanding the importance of not letting this beast know I am in trouble, I reply, "As interesting as a proposition as that is, I think I'm going to." And thinking quickly, I grab my water bottle from the nightstand. This doesn't please my girlfriend, as she decides to start screaming and fingering her way towards me. It is a supernatural scream, so high-pitched and bird-like, I feel as though my neighbors 3 houses down were going to ask us if they heard that last night. As fast as I can muster, I unscrew the lid and douse her in water. Like I knew what I was doing, her eyes close, her garbled appendages normalize, and she is back asleep. I'm going to sleep on the couch for a while, maybe forever. She'll understand when she's awake. In 9th grade, I was a pretty bad kid, always smoking, drinking, or sneaking out. One day, I met a senior boy who asked me out on a date. I was super excited because I had never really gone on an actual date before. Usually I would just sneak off to someone's house to drink or go to parties with lots of people. I told my parents about the date, and they were fine with it, as long as they met him first. I got all dressed up, and when he showed up at my door, he seemed really awkward meeting my parents. This gave me a weird feeling in my stomach, but I brushed it off. Once we were in his car, I asked where we were going. He started driving around and eventually pulled in behind our high school and parked. I was kind of disappointed because I thought we were actually going out somewhere, but that turned out to be the least of my problems. He turned the car off, which immediately made me uneasy. Every instinct in my brain was screaming at me to go home. But I was far away, and I didn't have an excuse to ask my mom to come get me since nothing had happened yet. He asked me to go in the back seat with him, and I said no. He kept asking over and over, and when I continued to say no, he began screaming at me to get in the back. I tried to get out of the car, but my door wouldn't open. He grabbed my arm really hard and forced me to look at him. He told me if I didn't get in the back, he was going to hurt me. I told him to let go and that he was already hurting me. He said he could make it a lot worse. I was so terrified, but right at that moment, my mom called me. I convinced him to let go so I could answer the call. I told him my mom said I needed to come home because I didn't clean my room. Grudgingly, he ended up driving me home, grumbling the whole way about how I was a frigid bitch. The minute he pulled near my house, I finally managed to get out of the car, and I ran inside to tell my mom everything. She said she had a really bad feeling, which is why she called and said I needed to come home. I don't know if he really would have hurt me, but I'd like to think that her intuition saved me.